When you think of Hunger Games, you think of me, District 8 hospital helper from Mockingjay Part 1. It's like trying to think of Christmas without thinking of Santa Claus. It's impossible. I am the Hunger Games. So when I heard they were making a new film, I was excited to get the phone call to reprise my role and make my triumphant return to the franchise. But unfortunately, we all know how that played out. My phone never rang, and I know a lot of enthusiasts for the District 8 hospital helper were holding on to this hopium that I was just pulling your leg trying to make it like a big marketing tactic, like, oh, I'm not in it, but really I am. Now that the movie's out, you'll soon have that cold reality set in on you that I'm not in it. Thus, I knew this film was doomed to failure. It's called The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, and that second part couldn't be more true. Nothing but snakes here. They didn't give me a role, and now they pay the piper. It's not doing super well with both audience and critics alike, and I can't help but get a tingling sensation that I know the reason why. It feels like this movie was an afterthought. I think the first draft of this script most likely focused on District 8 hospital helper and my origin story, but last second someone at the executive board at the top of the food chain said, no, we can't bring him back, he was too good. Thus they decided to tell the origin story of President Snow. And unfortunately, it just doesn't really work that well. The whole second half of this film feels like it was a complete rush just to get it over with, while still trying to maintain all the story beats of the book that it's based off of. They did a horrible job in the whole part 3, because the movie's 3 parts, and it really does feel like 3 movies blended together, and then the third one is fucking abhorrent, honestly. Like, when I went to see it with friends and we were talking afterwards, there were just so many different things you could point to, scratch your head, and be like, what were they thinking? They would have really benefited from just making this 2 films. I don't know why they were so insistent on it being 1, because then it just takes away from everything. If they made it 2 films, they would have had a much, much easier time fleshing out our main characters as well as their motivations. So that way, by the time you get to the end, there is a payoff that feels earned and makes sense. Whereas in this film, when you get to part 3, the fucking asshole blows right off. It's just this giant prolapse of things happening for the sake of things happening that are bad. So the whole first 2 parts of the movie position Snow as like a good, morally positive character. Outside of a few select instances where he does something that's morally questionable, but even those you can make arguments for that could be for the greater good in the position that he's currently in to work with. They set him up as a sympathetic, understandable character for the first 2 parts. And then I guess at some point they're like, oh shit, wait, he's the bad guy. And we all know he's supposed to be the bad guy because of the main franchise. He's the villain. So in part 3 they're like, well, how do we make him a bad guy? Just have him do these evil things for the sake of being evil. Like, it comes out of nowhere. Instead of it being like this slow, tragic descent into being a bad person, it's just this switch that gets flipped. Like, even he, in the movie, starts questioning why he's doing evil things. I don't want to get into spoilers, but he does something that causes one of the most important people to him to suffer in a big way. And he just starts breaking down, like, questioning why he's doing it, and we're left questioning why he's doing it because they don't really flesh out how he gets to the point to want to do something like that. It also didn't really serve much of a purpose to his character to do that in the moment either, especially when at the very end he kind of contradicts the motive behind doing it in the first place. It's so hard to talk about without getting into spoilers, but it's very silly. Now, let's go ahead and get deeper. I don't think the movie itself is like a horrible pile of garbage. It just really had too much it wanted to cover, and obviously not enough time to do it, so everything kind of gets dragged down. The first 2 parts are definitely stronger than the last part, that's for sure, but even they're not that great. So Lucy Gray is, of course, one of the main characters with Snow, and she just doesn't get any real level of fleshing out, unfortunately. Of course, Katniss had tons of movies to develop and everything, but in this film, you only have 1 for Lucy Gray, so a lot of times it's kind of hard to root for her, especially because most of her screen time is spent singing, it feels like. She's there kind of just to deliver musical numbers, and they become a little annoying towards the end, because it's like all she does. It's like the only characteristic she has is to just sing. And that's fine if they would have had a little more to her as a character. Now, I want to be clear, I think all of the performances from the main cast are pretty good. It's just unfortunate they weren't given high-quality material to work with, because they're trying to make the most out of some poop here. I'm talking some stink Some of these lines in here are laughable, like really, really dog shitty. Now, I also have to mention this because this had us giggling. Within the first, like, 45 minutes or so, of course, a lot of characters get introduced, but it feels like when they brought in Lucy Gray, like when she first arrives at the Capitol, they must have watched the "I'm the Joker, baby" YouTube video and then modeled her first interaction just like that. It's so weird because she doesn't really act like that for the rest of the film. It's just like the first couple times we're introduced to her, she's being all like turbo quirky, and then it's immediately thrown away. They must have been like, this is probably just the wrong direction to take her, which they were right. If that had continued, that would have been insufferable. But yeah, anyway, like I mentioned, the first two parts are not the worst thing in the world or anything. There is some sloppiness to them, there is some silliness to them, but there is charm too. It's not like awful or anything. I can't dive in too deep without spoilers, and I'm trying hard not to get into those here. But you get what you expect. There is a Hunger Games. It's a very like stripped down version of it because it's still so early. This is when they're just trying to figure out how do we get people hooked on it. So that's when, of course, they introduce the other elements like which bring it into the state that we saw it in the initial franchise. It is interesting seeing the Capitol before all of like the super advanced technology and before all the gaudiness and glamour that gets introduced. So I think the setting, of course, is still fun. And the first two parts do offer some entertainment there. The third part, though, is legitimately a slog. It's way too long of a film. Not because I think 2 hours and 40-something minutes can't work. I mean, it has plenty of times in the past. But here, the last 50 or so minutes is spent in part 3, and they just have too much they wanted to go over. It should have been a separate film or a series, because it just does not work tacked on here at the end. It's just like this hemorrhoid that's on the little butt of the rest of the film. It's not very good. It's painful. It really is. But narratively, it's the most important moment. Like, this is the most important stuff happening, but we have no emotional weight to any of it because they have to just like blast through it, just fucking set it ablaze to get through before it reaches like the 4-hour mark. Like, they just had way too much and not enough time because they had to cram it all into like the last 50 minutes. So part 3 super sucks. Like, I don't even know where I'd begin. Aaron compared it to Moonfall, like starting to teeter on Moonfall levels of disaster in the third part. And I have to agree, it kind of got close to the outrageousness of how Moonfall was. Like, it is bad at the end. There were so many problems with how they executed the third part. But I'm not just going to sit here and linger on that. Like I said, overall, the movie itself isn't like the worst thing ever. It's definitely the worst Hunger Games movie, and it's not even close. Not only because I'm not in it, though I think that does play a huge role. It's just a giant, tedious, jumbled mess of a film. I just don't really think it's worth the time. But you know what is worth your time? Starforge PCs. The best PCs in the universe. And right around the corner, we've got our Black Friday sales where you get 100% off PCs all the way through to November 27th. We have tons of PCs at multiple different price points to give you exactly what you need. So if you need to upgrade, get yourself a Starforge. If you're looking to start with PC gaming, check out Starforge's selection. There's a link in the description. But yeah, like I said, overall, Hunger Games, Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes is not very good. No official moist meter on it, but if I was giving one, I'd probably pop that puppy in around like a 50%-ish, somewhere in that general ballpark. But yeah, that's about it. See ya.